First things first, Israel, how are you?
Doing well, Robin. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for taking the time.
Yes.
So, before we get into the new record, I'd like to start somewhere else, which is Dripping Springs, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
How would you describe that place?
Dripping Springs, Texas is a small Texas town. It's just outside of Austin, about 40 minutes. And when you leave Austin, you just keep driving up. And you go up almost a mile while you're driving. So the hill country looks completely different than Austin and quite a bit different than the rest of Texas. It's like hills as far as you can see, big old sunsets, you know, it's cactus, and there are not any really super large trees. It's all these small kind of live oaks and shrub brush and vines, and has some of the most beautiful wild like flowers. And I know here in Holland, flowers are a national treasure, you know. But we have some nice wildflowers out there, the blue bonnets and the Indian paintbrushes, and so it looks amazing out there. It's just the countryside, and it's isolated, and it's hot. Sometimes it doesn't rain for a month or two at a time, which is a bummer because we have rain collection. That's how we get all of our water out there. It falls on the roof and goes into a tank.
Right.
So when it doesn't rain, you turn on the faucet and nothing comes out. It's always a surprise. It's just it's a wonderful place to be, just for people that kind of want to be in the country and kind of have a rural life. And we have 15 acres out there.
Well, it's interesting because you mentioned for people who want to have that rural life, and you spent a lot of time in New York City before. Which is quite a difference, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So what made you go for the country, go for it?
Well, I grew up in the country, you know, like as a boy. I was from, Missouri, in the middle of this country, and I lived out there, and for a number of years, my grandfather owned a 3,000-acre ranch in Missouri, cattle ranch. So I was very familiar with that. So then as a country kid, all I wanted to do was go to the city, you know, and got to go to New York City and live there and for 7 years almost. And through that, I got to go tour the world and see incredible cities all over. And it made me kind of just long for the country again and to be back in a space that I could create. And so I feel like I got the duality. It's like I still get a great balance of city life, you know, and I get to go back there and really kind of create and be with my family.
Did it remind you of when you were young, going back to the countryside, and then especially as you were kind of developing as a musician?
Yeah, I mean, it was always a part of me, you know, just like the countryside. I mean, I would be just on the farm doing stuff with my granddad and just riding horses and, you know, just had feeling kind of spiritual and magical in those places since I was a kid. So I think that after doing the city, and I went to New York to meet my people. That's why a lot of kids go to cities, is to meet their people, you know, and their ilk. And I met my band and people I'm still working with today. But I just got to the country as quick as I could, you know.
Right. How does your surroundings affect your creativity?
I think that's another thing that brought me there, you know, was for me, writing even in New York City, has always been a very isolated and private kind of process, you know. And so in New York, I would be in the apartment, you know, recording, demoing, just doing stuff as quietly as possible so neighbors wouldn't interrupt, you know, or be upset. So I knew there was a familiar idea that other artists before me longed for the country and to make art out there. And I knew I wanted a place to have a studio. And I knew it was going to be difficult to do that in the city, you know. So after New York, you know, you spend New York rent and stuff like that. It's like the country is like, wow, we can afford this. We could get some space and have a bigger place. And so we bought that place, and we moved to Dripping Springs and bought 15 acres. And shortly after the house, we built a studio, which you can't even see from the house. It's just isolated and just see hills forever. So it's oftentimes I'll open the doors and just, I conjure up ideas and stuff is just conjured up from the land and the view. Like I was saying, you see those sunsets, you're sitting out there on the deck and a couple deer walk by. It's just, there's this magical stuff that happens every day, and it's taught me how to appreciate that more deeply. It's, we were talking earlier about, Zen ideas, and there's something about nature that is a miracle in itself that we sometimes just overlook, that just animals are moving around, and they live here too. Is it really my ranch? Is it really my house? It's their house, Right. So I think it's taught me a lot about kind of being more in the moment and being more mindful, which I think opens up some nice room for creativity and experimenting and working.
And am I right in saying that in terms of the sonic quality of the album, you went into nature, went into with the recorder, or you tried to do some recording?
Yes. I was really inspired by a couple of different kind of John Cage ideas. John Cage he did the Ching stuff and all kinds of music of changes, and but he also believed in this idea that there was music everywhere, that there was, even in silence, there was music, and this kind of reference to like setting and place. And so I wanted to try to find those elements of the ranch and of my life, because obviously they're there lyrically, they're reflected in me, but I wanted that to even be a deeper sonic kind of bed for the record to exist, because it's made there. And I wanted it to feel like my home, and for that to be just representative and kind of, again, of that music within and music everywhere. So I just went around the countryside, just like recording anything. I had lists. Just long lists. I would, late night would be thinking about it, because you have to start thinking, oh, that'll make noise, like sticks breaking, leaves ruffling, crickets, the frogs. Oh, it's raining. We better get outside now. Wind is blowing. We got a rattlesnakes. So I had an intern who has since, he's become a crew member and he's on the road with me. But it was his, he'd just gotten out of engineering school. And he was coming to work at the studio, and it's the first week, and it's okay, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna record banging rocks together, pouring water on limestone, Yeah, welcome to the country. I think he was a little afraid at first. He was, sometimes people, when they're new to the country, it's when they come out there, I'll notice that they're a little apprehensive about things. They're just kind of, it gets dark and they hear a noise, and but yeah, so I wanted to capture those sounds, and that's what we did, just went through the land.
Is there one example that you can share that made it onto Lifted, that made it onto a song?
It's a lot of, on Rolling On, almost throughout the record there are these threads. I like to have these kind of sonic threads that, even if they're not loud and colorful, they just are beds that weave the record fabric, the sonic kind of fabric. And so I was telling you about the water tank at the ranch that collects the rain, and those things are awesome reverb tanks. So I got up, on the top of that with a kick drum, and put a kick drum in there and recorded this massive kick, and that's on Rolling On and on a few other songs where it's just that became a kick sound that we'd want to use on beats, just to, that's the reverb of the water tank,